Dear Venerables, dear sisters, Dhamma friends, this is the time for our Dhamma talk. May everyone consent 3 times sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tasse bhagavatu arahato samma sambuddhasse. Namo tasse bhagavatu arahato samma sambuddhasse. Namo tasse bhagavatu arahato samma sambuddhasse. Sabbasava sanghara pariyāyaṅ bhikkave desissāmi taṅ sādhukang sunāta sādhukang manasikarota bhāsissāmi ti. Dear Venerable, dear sister, dear Dhamma friends, we are in a retreat in this jhana grove, and we have already spent few days. Anyway, today is the first day as far as the English talk is concerned. According to the type of participants, the organization decided to deliver talks both in Sinhala and English. That means during the 8 days there will be 4 Sinhalese talks and 4 English talks. Yesterday we started the Sinhala one, and today is the starting day for the English talk. And as far as these 4 talks are concerned, I thought of delivering 4 talks on the single common topic, and a suggestion came from this side to base upon this Sabbasava pariyāya Sutta, that is you find in the teaching of the Buddha, specifically in the Tipitaka, Sutta Pitaka in Majjhima Nikāya, the Sutta number 2. It is called the doctrine about all taints. Asava is the key term. It's been translated as stains. So this is the one we are going to deal with respect to its book knowledge, theory knowledge, as well as the pragmatic side from the practitioner's point of view. This particular discourse, the Buddha delivered out of his own initiative. There is no other case history as such. He give a direct introduction, O monks, O bhikkhus. I shall teach you the discourse on the restraint of all the taints. This one, the taints or asava, you don't find in the Noble Eightfold Path. You don't find it in the 37 enlightenment factors, and it's kind of a teaching in the Buddhism, deal in the very deep philosophical aspects. Or otherwise we can say this is the most hidden and dominant part, unless otherwise you become mature, you become familiarized, you become seasoned about the gross layers in our mind, or in the sense gross defilements, then only we can understand and we can comprehend about these deep layers. But anyway, if we are to make a real change in our life, or real change in our likings and dislikings, if we wish any real change in our personalities, we must really go deep into this level. So, from the outlook, it appears like very profound, very deep-seated kind of traits in our mind. But anyway, as far as we expect a lasting result or a real kind of a change, we have to have at least some theoretical understanding and some deductive knowledges, and the best of it is to have kind of a touch, direct touch about this kind of thing. according to the traditional or conventional way of teaching of the Buddha's teaching, in one way it says that there are 3 layers of defilements, the very subtle and dominating hidden kind of layer, and the intermediate one, and the gross, superficial, outermost defilements. The outermost one is known as the transgressional kind, the medium kind is known as obsessional, and the subtlest one is known as the latent type. This asava is coming under this, the latent type, and when we are comparing it with the Western kind of analysis, it is sometimes recognized as unconscious. According to the Freudian kind of analysis, it is recognized as id. And there is no serious parallelism, but in order to understand, some comparison will give good hints one to understand. The Buddha, even before his enlightenment, when he was as a young person, he went to spiritual quest during the with the contemporary teachers, and he managed to accept the importance of the moral restrainment and moral training. And beyond that, he went into the training of the concentration, the tranquility, and he reached satisfactory achievements. But even then, though the teachers were happy with the performance of this disciple, the disciple himself was not happy. He went on searching in the noble quest. Then only he managed to see this this layer, the underlying layer, and then only he managed to explain everything and try to find a lasting answer for the human suffering. And in that sense, when he is teaching and when he is sharing with the other disciple, he says, Janato ahang bhikkhave passato asavana khayang vadami na ajanato no apassato. O bhikkhu, I say that the dissolution or destruction of these taints only for those who know and those who see it. It is impractical for those who can't see them and those who can't understand them. So therefore, before going into the really practical tackling of these taints, one has to understand them, one has to see, at least in the theoretical way. When the term asava is being translated, some translators use this term like taints. That is what you find in the book translated by Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi. Some others may go in giving some other shades of meaning, something like influxes or intoxicants or cankers, together with this term taint. Whenever a person is doing any kind of deed, physical, verbal or mental, without the proper understanding, without the knowing of that particular person, these taints, these influxes, these intoxicants are oozing into his physical, verbal and mental deeds, and ultimately it is leading to unexpected things, and therefore often it is leading to the suffering nature, disappointment and disheartening. Whatever the formulas, whatever the constitutions, whatever the way you formulate your future planning, as far as you have, you are not giving a proper weight for these stains, for these influxes, for these infiltrations, the end results will be quite unpredictable. So therefore, to have a lasting kind of a result, beneficial result, you have to understand at least there is a section, there's a part known as the stains and influxes and infiltration, and then only you can understand why these all appointments are leading to disappointments. So when we are come in terms of meditation, of course before practical realization of that, you have to have certain amount of understanding about this, and you have to see them, and then only you can really discipline them and control them. But without have a complete enlightenment, complete theoretical knowledge and maximum knowledge, you can start meditation if you are believing the instructions the teachers are giving, and if you are following the instruction what the Buddha has laid down. Slowly you cut through the gross layers of transgressional kind and the obsessional kind. You will be slowly exposing to this undercurrent, the influxes, the taints, the dominant tendencies, and till you see them, till you understand them, you have to accept them on the faith base. Or you have to believe it. There is such a black box there, such a underlying suspending part is there, sometimes known as the unconscious. So therefore, till you go there and see, very difficult to believe it. So therefore, even in the Buddhist meditation, we have a fair amount of trust upon the faith. Together with the other religions, this is also at the beginning appear like a superficial faith. But only the difference between the other religions and this one is, this superficial faith is verifiable. Within a short period of time, you can verify it, so it is worth taking, and that is how we come into the stream of discipline. And according to the Buddhist text, it says that discipline is three in types. The moral training, concentration training, and the wisdom training. Moral training is directed to the transgressional kind of defilements, namely the physical and verbal misdeeds. Once you assured and once you taken this up and trained yourself, you will be a cultured person and affable person, and you will be slowly uplifted, whereby you will not create much of a problem to the fellow beings in the society. You will not create any much problem to your future. And accordingly, you will get a fearlessness which can be experienced here and now, according to the proportion of moral training you are going to get. If you are not have any kind of moral responsibilities, namely the moral shame and the moral fear, what you have to entertain is the fear. If you wish to get rid of that, what you have to do is take in the moral restraint, and when you develop more and more, you will be free from 4 kinds of fears: the self-criticism and the criticism from the others, and you will be free from the fear of penal code and the constitutional and the civil law. At last, that go into the netherworld or apayas. So this is creating a kind of a healthy mind, so someone to have a full citizenship. Otherwise, you are living always with anxiety and the fear, and therefore your mental health is questionable. So once you come up to this level of moral training, you are dealing with the transgressional kind of defilements, and you are bound to get results then and there. Then only you will come to know these benefits you gain through this physical and verbal restrainment, and your mental part or mind still is untrained, it is still bewildered. So therefore your moral vows or precepts will be occasionally challenged, and its durability become questionable. And that is why those who already come to the moral restrainment has to give a second thought for the durability of the morality. One has to restrain or cultivate the mind. That is what we call concentration training. In the concentration training, we are dealing with basically 5 hindrances, and whenever these hindrances are being well tackled, it will be replaced by 5 jhanic factors, and you will come to know that you are starting to experience an immaterial kind of pleasure. The world is full of materialistic pleasure, luxuries and all the kind of thing, and so much so you go for this materialistic pleasure, you become deprived of the immaterial pleasure. That is why those who are seeking the both, specifically the material pleasure, they have to renunciate certain amount of worldly pleasures. For example, when you come to a meditation center like that, you have to renounce from your dear and near ones, you have to renounce from your properties, and you have to depend on what is the facilities given. And once that concentration training becomes successful only, at a time you can reach the face-to-face with your meditation object, and there, whenever the 5 jhanic factors come into being, you are bound to feel this immaterial pleasure. So this is the point where, if you are really keen, if you are really inquisitive, you can understand still there is a layer behind, underneath. That is what these asavas and others going to explain. So before the appearance of the Buddha, everyone thought up to the concentration level is what a human can do. Beyond that is heavenly. It is beyond the human challenge. So they had a kind of fear and respect, and therefore they never inquire into that, ponder into that, and therefore they thought the maximum they can do is going up to the concentration level, and then onward the balance is up to the omnipotent, omnipresent God, and they started to pray and give the balance to the God. But the Buddha, even before Buddha to be, he, after mastering this moral training and the concentration training, he went into further to understand the mechanism of these things. So with these instructions, what the instruction laid down by the Buddha, if someone is accepting and training oneself with the moral code and further going into the concentration training, and then onward, one can take the instructions according to the instruction laid down to the Buddha and go into understanding of these things. For example, in the first set of instructions for meditation, we come to know we can control, we can cultivate, we can do meditation in 3 ways: sitting meditation, walking meditation, and in the mindfulness in the day-to-day activities. But the concentration as a factor of, as a mental factor, mostly you will experience in sitting meditation. Compared to the sitting meditation, you will get a medium kind of concentration in the walking, and the least you will get in the day-to-day activities. So, better to take example from the sitting meditation. When you are practicing, when you are meditating on your primary object, for example, if we are to take the in-breath and out-breath, whenever you are in a position to to keep the object face to face with, you will be in a position to discern this is the in-breath and this is the out-breath like. In other words, you can say, whenever you are in the in-breath, you can make sure this is not out-breath. Whenever you are in the out-breath, you can make a discernment, delimitation as to this is not in-breath. So in-breath as in-breath and not as out-breath. Out-breath as out-breath and not as the in-breath. When you keep on observing, once a certain amount of concentration achieved, you can come to understand the differences between the in-breath experience and the out-breath experience. This is the way you increase the mindfulness, the strength of mindfulness, the vigilance and the diligence. So in a way that is trying to go more and more closer to your primary object. So therefore, whenever you start to go in inquiring, go plunging into the primary object, you are being asked to observe it more vigilantly, more diligently, and more immediately. The starting point is to see as to what are the differences, or what are the different experiences of in-breath and out-breath. So when that happens, your mind is fairly close to the primary object, that means in-breath and out-breath, and it is easy to conclude, and you will agree, you can understand the object once it come up to a certain degree of its roughness. And then only your faculties, your tactile sensation, or your mind can perceive it and discern it, and then onward you see this is the in-breath. And it's arising and passing away. And when the out-breath happens, after a certain extent or certain grossness only, you can perceive the out-breath, and then onward you can see the difference between in-breath and out-breath. When you keep on observing, if you wish to see the functions of this asava, or these taints, the influxes, the infiltrations, cankers, this sensitivity is not enough. So you must be ready to observe as and when the in-breath happens, and how it come into being, how it come into perception from nothingness. And as and when the out-breath happens, you must be prepared, you must be vigilant, you must be diligent to see the beginning of the perception of the out-breath, how it happens from nothingness to out-breath. When you observe, you will see the incoming part, the arising part of the in-breath as well as the out-breath. So, the Buddha, he says, I will teach you the restrainment of these cankers and the taints, only those who see them and only those who know them. And he asked, what does it mean by knowing and seeing? He says, this Yoniso Manasikara and Ayoniso Manasikara has two tools. Yoniso Manasikara means a wise kind of reflection. Ayoniso Manasikara is unwise kind of reflection. So, in this context, what is the wise reflection is, you must be ready, you must be diligent, you must be vigilant to see as and when it arises. Namely the in-breath and the out-breath. So when you are to observe that kind of thing, few other things you have to make sure. That means already arisen object should not take you for a ride. Whenever the in-breath happens, if you are going to get engaged with the signal, if you are going to react with it, if you are going to assume with it, you will be taken for a ride. So if you are to observe, it's a rising part, the formation, the oncoming part. You have to be very diligent, you have to be very vigilant, so that your existing mindfulness has to be more refined, the existing concentration has to be more refined. There should have a diligent effort to see the arising, the formation part of the object. And the aiming must be very, very precise. So therefore, to have a wise reflection, these two aspects has to be aligned with diligent effort and the precise aiming. So that is, say, the vigilance, your preparedness, as and when the object arises. If you are successful, you can see how the in-breath come into being, how the out-breath come into being. The more and more you become diligent, your noting mind and the noted object come very face to face, very closely. When that is happening, automatically you feel you will be slowly cut off from the bodily pains, outside sounds and wandering thoughts. Other side also easily explainable, that is to say, if your mind is not vigilant and diligent, it is not reflecting the object wisely, be easily carried out by the sounds, easily carried out by the pain and the thoughts and sleepiness and all the kind of thing. So by knowing it, by being prepared, you have to be vigilant and diligent as and when the object arises. So you are precisely aiming. When that happens, if you manage to go closer and closer to the object, it is double-fold result. One thing is, you can see the formation of the object in one hand, and you can be free from thoughts, pain and the sounds. So therefore it is encouraging. Once you come to know this art of precise aiming and diligent effort, it is rewarding, it is giving the enthusiasm for you to go more and more. More and more you go there, you can see how the formation part, the tender part of the in-breath as well as the out-breath. Less and less you will be carried away, taken for a ride by the arising object. Instead, you will be slowly mastering the arising part of the object. So therefore now you see two aspects. One thing is the arising part of the object, and the middle, the gross part of the object. But in mastery, you have to understand the arising through the middle to the end. But here, in the Yoniso Manasikara, or in this wise reflection, you are supposed to, at the beginning, to see the early part, the formation part. When that is happening, naturally, the efficiency of your mind increases. You are bound to see the end of the object too. That means your sensitivity, your effectivity of the mind increases. That is generally happening through three aspects of the energy, the concentration and the mindfulness. And the energy means as and when the object arises, you have to be there. You have to have a diligent effort. And precise aiming also must be there. You must not entertain any bewilderment as to whether I am in the out-breath or in-breath. You must be certain this is in-breath as and when the in-breath happens. And when it is happening, the mind is not superficially observing it. It plunges into, it penetrates into the object, and then establishment is much, or anchorage is much more than the superficial thing that it was. And that is how the the energy aspect, the mindfulness aspect and the concentration aspect has to be aligned with. When this is happening, you'll be slowly cut through and try to see the as and when the object arises, how it comes from nothingness to your perceivable grossness. So when that happens, usually the yogi reports in the interviews, when I am observing face to face with the primary object, namely the in-breath and out-breath, the in-breath and out-breath become calm and quiet. Of course, this calming down is not due to the precise aiming and diligent effort. The calming down happens because you are now sitting, your mind is introvert, it is not necessary much of the metabolic activity, so less and less air transaction happen. Your effort is, or the wise reflection is, understanding body is settling down, the mind is settling down, and the object that is in-breath and out-breath is settling down. You are not adding any kind of a turmoil. You support it and then let the penetrative nature of the mind to increase. When that happens, even the object becomes subtler. You never give up. You keep on observing and the object becomes more tamed and it has become more seasoned, and your preparedness to the oncoming object is slowly increasing. When that happens, as I mentioned earlier, not only the beginning, but right from the beginning you will try to understand the object, the perceived object, and then feel how it slowly go into its middle, that the gross in-breath, and then ceases to exist, and towards the end of the breath. So this is what in the Satipatthana Sutta or in the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha instruct the yogis, Sabbakaya Padisangvedi, Asasissamiti Sikkati, Sabbakaya Padisangvedi, Pasasissamiti Sikkati. You have to see the whole breath body, not only the middle, the cross part. You must be diligent and vigilant to see it's right from the beginning, through the middle, to the end. When this is happening, the mind and the object become little by little closer and closer. Your concentration will be more settled, and as I mentioned, the outside distractions will be more and more away. So when that happens, after a certain extent, after a certain amount of subtlety, the untrained mind, unmindful mind, often come and complain, object is not perceivable. Or yet another subtle way it will say, I can't discern the in-breath and out-breath. Or sometimes you may feel sleepy, slimy, congealing of the mind happens. So these are the way deceiving all the defilements. So therefore you have to go prepared. When the mind become calm, introvert, when the in-breath and out-breath become somewhat subtle, and the body is also settling, meditation is going healthily and nicely, but this kind of misunderstanding as to the difference between in-breath and out-breath is disappearing, object becomes subtle, and the mind becomes slimy, or sometimes you may start to entertain doubts as to am I taking wrong instructions, am I bewildered, or I can't find the orientation of the object. Like all these things can happen. So therefore the beginner, whenever these symptoms bound to arise, they get bewildered either by falling into sleep, that is lack of energy, or by over-enthusiastic entertaining of the mind, agitation of the mind. Therefore, some tends to do forced breathing to make the breath cross. something to open their eyes as to see whether the body is intact. And some things, it is something wrong with the meditation, therefore they get up and go. So when these kind of changes happen, if you have good opportunity to report them into a teacher, and if the teacher also really guiding you to show you that the mindfulness is intact, concentration is increasing, and the in-breath and out-breath become very, very close to the mind, that is why the delimitation or discrimination between the in-breath and out-breath appear like not discriminative. So this is nothing to worry. You have to still go with the diligent effort and precise aiming. Then you can understand very subtle kind of breathing. Earlier you usually come and say it is not perceivable, but if you go prepared, you can perceive them very subtle way. Even then, you will understand there is no remarkable difference between the in-breath and out-breath. This is not something wrong with your meditation. It is not one of your mistakes. This is the way you go to see the very subtle part of the in-breath and out-breath due to the efficiency of your mindfulness and the concentration. It is something to be promoted, something to be encouraged. So encouragement is not to give up and completely to keep up this phenomena face to face with you, and that is how the mindfulness become very sharp and the concentration become well established. When these things happens, instead of the individual characteristics of the in-breath and out-breath, that is to say, the discriminative characteristic of the in-breath, out-breath, you are bound to see the common characteristics of the in-breath and out-breath. This is a very critical change. Whenever you see the discriminative characteristic of the two things, your mind try to entertain it with varietal entertainment. Whenever you try to see the common character, you develop boredom. You develop monotony. You develop kind of a tastelessness, flat, sometimes irritation nature, irritability. So when this changeover happens, if you are not vigilant, if you are not diligent, if you are not well instructed, if you are not unprepared, definitely you will get up and go, or entertain doubts, as I mentioned earlier, or fall into sleep. So many yogis, those who are starting with so much of enthusiasm, often give up the meditation at that level, thinking something wrong. So that is why that you have to listen to talks, you have to discuss, and you have to have interviews. Then only you can cut through and go further. And more you observe one object continuously for a long time, instead of discriminative characteristic, you are bound to see the common characters. Whenever the common characters manifest, the mind the meditation become lethargic and monotonous. So therefore, without giving up, if you continue, what you will experience is some kind of manifestations of 4 elements. Instead of the in-breath and out-breath kind of naming and labeling, you can see some stiffness, some movement, some vibrations, some influxes of some sensations, lightness or light perception, whatever may be, you are start to feel. So these characteristics are common to the in-breath and out-breath. And when that happens, whenever you become little disinterested or lethargic or monotonous, yet another distraction can happen. The background sounds, which was dominant so far, will appear like in a dramatic way. Sometimes the distractive thoughts, wandering minds, fantasizing, daydreaming, going to start. And the bodily pains also increases as you keep on sitting for a long time. So if you are not sharp, if you are not giving the priority to your primary object, and instead if you are going to entertain some monotonous nature, these things again come and mess up the situation and you will get bewildered. So therefore you have to expect, as and when the common characteristic going to happen, the disinterest, the flat nature can happen, and therefore these sounds and the pains and the thoughts may come, increase to come. So if you are lucky, or if you are prepared, and if you go with enough energy in your mind, you can still continue with this, the common characteristics, and definitely you will notice, even the bodily pains are there, they are not unbearable. Even the background thoughts are there, they are not addressing to you. They are just inner thoughts. Even the background sounds are there, they are not calling you, are not meant for you. Your bewildered mind only get upset with these things. If you have the inquiring mind, you can understand amidst of all these difficulties or distractions, you can still continue with the primary object, which has now slowly changed into manifestations of 4 elements. So the mind has to keep on observing with these all the elementary characteristics. And if you are sharp enough, you will understand, or in the sense if you are sharp enough to understand the elementary characteristics of the primary object, you will understand sound means also a manifestation of some elementary characteristics. Pain also a manifestation of some elementary characteristics. Everything is coming out of the same energies, same elements, and your labeling, your understanding, your perception make them different. So in order to see that, you must not give up at the halfway. Keep on practicing. Your mind becomes so and more introvert, going to see the phenomena in, and you feel like cut off from the rest of the world. That is, your mind go to the introvert, what are the visual impingements and the sound waves and other everything will be ward off, and you will be going into the deep. And it is appear like you are cutting off from the world and going into the inner space, and what you experience is kind of a whole body experience. And understanding that in a proper perspective is the early part of Yoniso Manasikara, or this wise reflection. Or if you do not have that wise reflection, as I mentioned, you will be carried away by a lot of other distractions. So therefore, this part of the life of the meditator is very risky or very challenging, and therefore you have to safeguard a lot with trial and error method. So normally in the meditation instruction it says, if you wish to keep up the mindfulness, you must not react the object as it is happens. You must just try to see its nature, and rather in the technical jargon, you have to see the arising part of the object. So you start this with the primary object as the in-breath and out-breath, and when you keep on practicing and developing the skillfulness, you can see your bodily pains also come into being, come into perception once it come up to a certain grossness. But if you have a sharp mindfulness, you can understand they are just not coming from the blue, it is coming from the subtlety to the grossness. Sounds, thoughts and everything. So once the skillfulness develops together with the primary object, same knowledge you can apply to all the arising objects. And instead, if you are going to react with the primary object or secondary objects, you lose the chance to see the arising part of the object. The best and the classic example is the pain. Whenever the pain arises, natural tendency is to get rid of that. Consider it as an enemy. Consider it as distractions. So therefore, you try to push it off. Whenever you are trying to develop that kind of attitude, and your mental background will be colored by the hatred. It is undermining tendency become the hatred. Therefore, you can't see the pain as it is. That is why the Buddha says, pain is like a wedge or a peg driven into your flesh. He says it is painful. But he asks, if yet another peg or another wedge is driven into the same place, it will be unbearable. So therefore, the pain is like a wedge or peg driven into your body. The hatred you develop is the second one, then only it becomes unbearable. So instead of hating it, instead of reacting to it, if you try to see the oncoming pain with the neutral mind, non-reacting mind, or unassuming way, you can understand. First of all, you will understand the nature of the pain, whether it is like a cutting or burning or piercing or twisting or whatever may be. That means without any malice, without any the hatred. And when you are to observe the pain with that kind of wise reflection, slowly, you will understand your time be face to face with the pain is increasing. Because you are not going to develop any kind of a hatred towards that. And therefore, the pain becomes yet another object, just like the primary object. And it will become a subject matter for you to study. When you are studying, definitely easy for you to understand when the pleasurable feeling happens, the undermining tendency is the desire. When the painful feeling happens, the undermining tendency is the hatred. And if you are lucky enough to note each and every painful and the pleasurable feeling, you will discover most of the time your stream of consciousness is not with that kind of a pain and pleasure. Instead, there are a lot of gaps, which you can say no pain, no pleasure kind of states. You never notice them, because they are not titillating, they are not dramatic, and it is covered by ignorance. So therefore, whenever the pain arises, if you are to observe without reaction, whenever the pain arises, if you are to observe without reaction, that means without the hatred, pleasure without desire, you are bound to get bookkeeping on your feeling world, and you find a majority of your bookkeeping is unaccountable, difficult to explain the whole day, because your mind is driven, or mind is attracted only to the pain and pleasure, but it can't read no pain, no pleasure. Exactly when you are, the same thing you can understand, when and where you are observing the in-breath and out-breath, the early beginning part of the in-breath is unperceivable. The end part of the in-breath also unperceivable. You perceive only the middle. And after the end of the in-breath, the starting part of the out-breath also unperceivable. You observe only the peak of it, and the cessation part of the out-breath also unperceivable. But when you are reporting, you will say throughout you can see the in-breath, out-breath like. But huge gaps are there. So whenever you observe what is perceivable, without a remainder, and with the idea of preparedness, you are bound to see there's a huge gap. And that easily we can see the parallelism with the Western psychology, the unconscious. The truth is lying on the unconscious. Not in these peaks, not only this perceivable, and our external worldly knowledge is resting on this perceivable knowledge. It is definitely a very, very minority of our perception. By mastering whatever perceivable, right from the beginning to the middle to the end, irrespective of the primary object and the secondary object, you will understand huge black box. Huge unaccountable part is there. Whether you study from the materiality or corporeality, dwelling on the body as body, or you are dwelling on the feeling, or depending on the mind, or any other phenomena, you will understand our stream of consciousness is spotted and dotted by some good and bad things. But if you are keen enough to cover them by as much as possible with the mindfulness, the huge part remain unexplained. So this is the part that you have to understand where the middle path is lying. So unless otherwise you have kind of a wise reflection, you will try to find the answer usually in what is perceivable, and it is not only minority of your stream of consciousness. You have to understand this is only happening to your gross, uncultured, uncultivated mind. So more and more cultivation of the mind, meditated mind, go to these subtle layers. When you go to the subtle layers, you can understand it is completely depend on the wise reflection, and some teachers translate it as a radical reflection. Our conventional mind is to get hooked up with or assumed with what we perceived. And therefore it is naturally cutting you off from the unperceivability, unconscious. So unless otherwise you have a radical reflection, unless otherwise you have a wise reflection, definitely this door will be closed. So in the sitting meditation you will get a better chance to cut through, or in the sense which is sometimes explained as the going against the grain. And even if it appear like a boring, even if it appear like a monotonous, even if it appear like a uncertainty, subtlety, fearfulness, and you have to understand this is the path, the golden key to assimilate the middle path. So whenever you go to known to unknown, our rational mind get excited. Our deductive minds come and say, something wrong somewhere, therefore better to open your eyes and get the natural perception, or start force breathing in order to get the normal sensation. And what really happens is, whenever you cut off from the sensuous impingements, and when it is confined only to this involuntary action of in-breath and out-breath, slowly mind is going from known to unknown, grows to the subtlety, and our ego start losing its footing. And that is how it becomes excited, and it appears like rationalization, It appears like a deductive knowledge. It appears like inferential knowledge. It appears like a safeguarding yourself. It appears like a friendliness to yourself. And it comes and gives so much of suggestions. And unless otherwise you know this asava or these stains or influxes, though it appears like friendly, though it has a bright, good face value, underneath it is pulling you to the perpetual suffering of samsara. And again and again reconstructing your ego and boosting your egoistic idea, putting you up on the pedestal and start whitewashing. So that is why the Buddha says at the outset, you have to understand you have to have a certain amount of radical or wise kind of a reflection. Then only when the meditation going to explore, when it is going to unwind, you have to have brevity and to find the correct path and the wrong path. And it is always happening through a trial and error. Because whatever the experience you gain, it is confined to yourself. You can't share it with the others. That is why the Buddha says, I can just tell you the way, but you have to do it yourself and confirm yourself, because this unconscious is specific to one person. So therefore, the cutting through and going there, each and every has to develop their own ways and means, strategies. So only thing is making your mental framework to cut through with the help of early practice of moral training and the concentration training. Supposing that you are developing the mindfulness and the concentration, and if the breath is, for example, if the breath is the primary object, it's going to go to the very subtle layers. And if you do not have a healthy mind, you can understand what kind of a panic situation can happen. Anxiety can happen. Uncertainty can happen. And on top of that, if you have no moral background, definitely the self-criticism will make havoc. You will not find any solace. So that is why whenever you see that mind has developed certain amount of concentration, and when it is penetrating to known to unknown, to the gross to the subtlety, ego to non-ego situation, have to again and again revise your mental and physical health. Mental health means the moral conditions, healthy shame and the healthy fear. Moral shame and the moral fear. And physical also you must be contented. And then only with the help of these things you can daily go into this unknown area. And for that, the basic tool, of course it is the mindfulness, but here it is well reinforced, and the Buddha claim it as the yoniso manasikara, the wise reflection, because our mind is in a rut. So always our reflection is unwise, because we try to assume, we try to react whatever the object arises. As far as we are reacting, we get trapped into the object. The non-reactional, unassuming way of observation as to see the object as and when it arises without prejudices, without preconceived ideas, is the what here mean by wise reflection, the radical reflection. So when that happens also, you can cut through the jungle and you can go against the grain, and the time you allocate for that, proportionate to that time, you earn your own first-hand experience. And this process is, at the beginning, it is irrespective of the people, it is painfully slow. Because it is going against your liking and disliking. It is going against your personality. It is going against the cultural upbringing. But whatever may be, this is leading to the middle path. It is leading to the truth. So therefore, at the beginning, you have to have the basic trainings and certain amount of theory knowledge and a good way of reflecting, or in the way, deductive knowledges. That is how the cutting through this jungle of defilement happens, and not like the moral training and the concentration training. When you go to this dormant type, when you go to this tains, their face value is very friendly, but they are always working, or most of the time working in a disguised way. So therefore, by the face value, you can't judge it. The best thing you can do is, let it happen in 1001 time. Repeat it again and again under the light of the teaching of the Buddha, and with the technique of radical reflection. One day you can see it's the real face. So till that you have to do this trial and error. But anyway, there is no other way than this trial and error. So therefore, whoever taken a chance and time to go take this path is the only person going to have his or her own well-being. There are a lot of other methods. It is all are extrovert. This is the only method inviting right from the beginning. Go introvert and painfully slow at the beginning, going against the grain. So therefore you have to have a well-reinforced mind for this radical reflection, for this wise attention. So whatever the mistakes even you do on this path is something valuable, because ultimately you will understand that your own mistakes are the proximate teacher for you. Because no one has ever gone without doing mistakes. So therefore, mistakes is not a negative thing. It is not a discouraging thing. It's the only way. So when you keep on practicing, you will slowly understand the meaning of what does it mean by the wise reflection and against the unwise reflection. And that is why you have to listen again and again and read again and again to the teaching of the Buddha. But definitely these kind of teachings appear very profound and not very palatable. So therefore, the gradual training, gradual discipline from Sila Samadhi Panya, the moral training leading to the concentration training, and the concentration leading to the wisdom training is the most foolproof system. So you all are already now understood these early parts. So this talk that I tried was to give some hints and give some ways and means to think new, think in radical way, think in wise way, so that you will get the encouragement to face the oncoming object in more and more in the future sittings. And in future talks, I will try to go more deep into the sutta, and you will understand, once you develop, clear this ground up to that level, how we can proceed further into the other foundations of mindfulness. And of course, more and more you go deeper, it becomes more and more automatic. Only difficulty is lying on the starting points. So therefore, without getting exhausted, without getting discouraged, again and again you have to apply. And then one day you will be happy because that your early mistakes are going to give a real correct path for you. So with that remark, I would like to sum up the talk. Thank you very much for listening. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Evening at 8 o'clock, we'll be meeting for a question and answer session. And if you have any remarks or statements or any question, please You are welcome to this question and answer session. Thank you.